Here we go. Let's do this.
We've got one life, one shot. Who do you want to be? What do you want to do? Addicted to Betterment, a podcast to inspire us to keep going, to try something new, to dream, to think big, bigger, to overcome. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go.
Hey, it's Nikki back on Addicted to Betterment with our dear friends and educators around health, all aspects of health, coming back from a part 2 from my conversation with Dr. Teddy Saddoris and John Nieters. Last time we're talking about relationships and really looking in the mirror at the things that sometimes are harder to take, total acknowledgement of, the patterns that are showing up that sometimes we don't see as loudly as we need to, so we can break those patterns and really be set up for a strong foundation with relationships in our life. Those are romantic relationships or, work relationships, all kinds of relationships. And I loved that episode, and we definitely couldn't cover everything that we wanted to. So today we're transitioning into now how to live the practice. And the word practice, I think, is important there, that this is not mastery. It's a constant evolving thing where we keep trying things and sometimes we mess up, but living the practice, the habits, the boundary setting, and how we consistently heal, to live most healthy. So welcome back. And Dr. Saddoris, I know that you had mentioned, I think before we completely move forward, let's acknowledge that we do get stuck, and the things that keep us or hold us back before we kind of dive into all these practices. Talk about that a little bit. It's a practice. We do get stuck. We get hung up. Talk a little bit about that.
I find that most people that get stuck is that they think if they try harder and they keep doing the same thing over and over again, but they think if only I try harder, it'll work this time. And that's kind of the definition of insanity, according to Einstein, right? So we have to do something different, right? And sometimes we just don't recognize that when we keep encountering similar problems, what is the universe trying to tell us, right? Rather than think I'm unlucky or, this isn't fair or, why am I always having this person causing trouble? And then this person's out of your life and you say, hallelujah, they're gone. But then you have another person that's twice as bad as the other one, right? It's because you haven't recognized what's causing it. And it's coming from you. It's not them. And once we come to that mindset that anytime I am struggling with any kind of issues in my life, that it is not them, it's me. And me has to understand what is it in me that's being triggered. And once I understand that, then I can get healed from it. And then it no longer bothers me anymore. But until that happens, until you get the awareness of this, and some people, they just spend their whole life in misery and just don't realize that they're creating their misery. And they have to step back from themselves, not in judgment, but why? Why is this happening to me? Because it's not for pain. It's not to be hindered, but it's for me to grow. And when I change my perspective to everything that happens to me is good and that it allows me to grow in that, then I see all kinds of possibilities, and that gives me all kinds of opportunities.
Yeah, I think another piece of this too is this is why meditation is so important. It allows you to view your life from another lens. You're in your own head all day long, right? So you're only seeing things from one perspective, and you have emotional triggers and all this stuff that you need to work on. That's why you sit with your thoughts, and that's why you meditate. And when you meditate, the goal is to kind of look at your life from a third person's perspective. So you can see, okay, this triggered me this way. Why was that a trigger? And then you can get to that work. And then when it's not a trigger anymore, as my mom said, you're not bothered by it. It just rolls right off your back. And that allows you to go through your day and actually move with intention so that you can build whatever relationships or situations that you want, because ultimately you are the creator of your own world. You are the creator of your own life by the choices and decisions that you make on a day-to-day basis.
Definitely. It's kind of a law of the universe. For every action, there's a reaction, right? And we have to determine how is my reaction going to be, or what my action's going to be. And I think meditation, people find that, oh, it's spending time all by yourself. And I think initially you need that. I have kind of changed a little bit on that because I find myself as the day goes on, I'm constantly monitoring, why am I reacting this way? Not in judgment, but for understanding. When we judge, it limits us because it doesn't allow the creative part, the access to our spiritual connection to give us the truth of what's going on. And so I just find myself most of the time just, questioning. And I think that's the difference from a lot of people is that they just go along accepting, but not trying to understanding, right? And once we start questioning, then we're getting to the understanding part. Because how can I treat something if I don't understand it? If I don't know what the problem is, how can I fix it, right?
Totally. Let's talk about boundaries as we're living or moving into this living healthy relationships and integrating, the inner work practices, but then some of these habits. I think boundaries and relationships is a big one. We touched on it a little bit in our last episode, but let's go deeper on that. Like, let's bring some context on what does that really mean? Healthy boundaries and relationships, and maybe give some different scenarios.
So I think a big thing here with boundaries, a lot of people see boundaries as just rejection, right? And ultimately, it's more about honoring yourself. It's like a sacred honoring of your own energy. So you can say no to people with love and let them know, like, in a very kind and loving way, this is that boundary because you have to protect your own energy. Otherwise, you're just constantly filling other people's cups up. I've been guilty of this a lot in my younger days, where you're just filling other people's cup up, and what are you doing for yourself? You have to be able to not lose yourself in the world. And that's why you move with the intention. So, I mean, it's a big deal. Otherwise, you're not really protecting your own energy. You're getting imprinted on all day long, and you're not going to really accomplish much that way. So, I mean, another piece here is when you go see a healer, the healer is not necessarily responsible for healing you. You heal yourself. The healer is more about showing you what potentially can be healed so that you are aware, and then you can understand and then do the inner work.
Yeah, I think people get confused about self-care and selfishness. Self-care is understanding yourself and what your needs are, and understanding that your limitations and your weaknesses as well. So you're never meant to do everything perfectly. You're meant to do a couple things that were meant to be your alignment, and the others you need to pass. There's someone else that's their lane, right? And sometimes we get drawn into other people's lanes, and then we are so overwhelmed. And we're so, and then sometimes as a Christian, we start praying, God, help me bring more people or with this and that. And, or there's too much on my plate. And then God will say to me, did I ask you to do those things? No, you picked it up. And now you're wanting me to help you on something that you were never meant to pick up in the first place, right? So sometimes we have to let go of things. And letting go is so freeing once you start recognizing your weaknesses. Your weaknesses can be your strengths as well. Because once you recognize it, then you stay out of the wrong lanes and you pursue the things that are truly in your heart that you're meant to accomplish. And that's not being selfish. You're still caring about people. But at the same time, when you're in your own lane, you're the most effective person in reaching out to others and helping them as you also is growing in your own life.
I love that. And actually, another thing that I recently saw, which really hit home here, is think of yourself, your energy, your life as like a cup. You only have so many pebbles that you can throw into that cup. And if you're putting these pebbles that aren't necessarily meant for you in that cup, it's taking up some of your energy. And if it's negatively charging you, that's causing a lot of stress for no reason. So when you take those pebbles out, now you've got room for other things that are more fulfilling. Another Chinese kind of proverb, if you're taking a bucket, filling it up with water and putting it into a larger bucket, you have to empty that bucket so you can refill it up. So it's a transfer of energy constantly. So when you have these things come in, yes, you can attract chi, you can attract energy, but then you dispel it, you discharge it so new energy can come to life.
Talk about how to communicate boundaries to someone that you love, and they may not understand, or I don't know if the word respect, it's pretty big there, but really being the one to lead the boundaries, but helping the other person to honor that. How do you communicate that best?
Yeah, I deal with that when I was treating people with addiction because they didn't have any boundaries. Okay, John's chuckling, but it's true. Um, unfortunately, they have learned this behavior, and like any behavior that's been learned, it's not going to extinguish overnight. What you have to do is be firm in your commitment of what that boundary is. If you're wishy-washy, it's never going to be established, right? And they're going to try all kinds of things. They'll give tantrums, they'll do threats, they'll get angry, they'll slam the door, they'll do whatever. But you don't have to react to that. You don't have to respond to that. You can always say, I know that you're used to this because that's how I was before, but I realized that it wasn't doing you any good, and it certainly wasn't doing me any good. And I have decided that I have to do what's best for myself, but also for you, because it's not good for somebody to always try to take, right? And it's not good for someone to give. Life is all meant about flow. We take, but we flow out, right? And we get stagnant if we have one way or the other. And so, I know with my son, when he was having some addiction things, and before I was always an enabler and trying to keep him from getting harmed, but he wasn't allowing him to learn the pain of his addiction. And pain is so helpful. People, when I talk to my patients, I said, oh, that's good you're having pain. I don't want you to eliminate your pain. I just want it so it's not miserable for you. And they said, well, I want it all gone. I says, no, because then you're going to do things that are going to overhurt yourself, and then you cause permanent damage. Pain is telling you to stop doing what you're doing, right? There's a reason why there's pain, right? We need to sit back and assess why and stop doing what we're doing.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, having gone through what I've gone through in life, how do you gain wisdom? You don't learn that something is good or bad for you just by never having pain or hurt. The greatest teacher is pain. You can't learn things without it. So think about your life. Think about the most painful moments that you've had. Now think about what you learned from those painful moments, and then reflect upon other times that weren't painful. You didn't really learn the same amount that you did when you were in pain. So that's a big piece here. And ultimately, as we said earlier, you're the creator of your own reality. So when somebody acts aggressive, when somebody does slam the door or any other thing like that, you have the ability to control the way you react to that. And as my mom said, ultimately, you hold all the power because you can direct that conversation any way that you choose to. If you act impulsively and get riled up or negatively act back, what do you think it's going to do? It's going to add fuel to the fire, right? But if instead you redirect it out of care and love and get them to understand that you're here for them, but not in the manner that they are projecting onto you. Most of the time, that is a projection, and that is coming from a place of hurt. So you have to meet them where they're at and redirect with intention through love.
That's so good. So, is there a case where you could give an example, or just speak into your learnings around boundaries going too far, where someone might be shutting someone out, or it's a protection mechanism? Is that a thing with boundaries?
Of course. I mean, ultimately, you choose who you give your energy to and how you give that energy. So ultimately, if it gets to be overburdening and it's just constantly negative, you have the ability to redirect and then choose where you're going to spend that energy. So maybe you don't spend time with that person. And that's a soft way of getting them to understand that you don't approve of these actions without becoming aggressive or adding fuel to the fire. And then they're going to reach out and they're going to say, oh, well, why aren't you around anymore? All this stuff. And you say, well, I just don't want to support that action. I have to put my energy in places that is going to not only help myself, but uplift others. And clearly me being around you isn't doing that. So until we're able to see eye to eye here, I have to spend my time elsewhere.
Yeah, I think where Nikki's coming from, maybe I'm wrong, is that, yes, I mean, you got the overbearing person, But then you got some people that have some problems, and sometimes they don't understand where you're coming from. And I think it just comes down to communication without judgment and without an emotional reaction. Because when we put judging words like you should or you shouldn't or you must or you must not, that puts people on edge in defense, right? But if we approach people in the way of having them understand yourself and why you're needing this, and that helps open the door. They may still have their negative reaction, but at the same time, you're not adding any fire to that. You're just letting them know that you love them and you love yourself, and that it is something that we both need. And that takes, I mean, it's hard to not be emotional when people are reacting. But when you start coming from the perspective of not trying to hurt somebody, but from perspective of wanting to heal them because they have a problem and you have a problem, right? And that you're working on your problem. And as you know, when you work on yours, somehow that mysteriously helps them work on theirs. And so it's allowing them to grow as you also are growing.
I like that a lot. I think another piece to this too is a practical tool. I think that, when somebody acts impulsively, whatever that looks like, before you react, you kind of want to collect yourself. Take a deep breath. When you take that breath, you're putting life into yourself and you're oxygenating not only your brain, but your blood so that you can think clearer instead of just impulsively reacting whichever such way. And again, just like my mom said, you're coming at this through the lens of love to help each other on things. So think about it through that lens, but collect yourself before you just impulsively react, because that's not going to help anybody.
Yeah, they actually have a scientific mechanism of that. Our reactive response is really close to our primitive brain, and that's our survival instinct. Danger is happening, you either run, you fight, or you freeze, right? And so that breathing, and maybe it takes more than one breath, but 2 or 3 breaths to get the transmission to the thinking part of your brain that's not responding emotionally, does take time. Now, what we find though is the more that we practice that calmness and allowing it to come, you get a fast track. So it may not be quite as fast as the instinctive part, but it becomes very quickly there to you. At first, it might take you 15 minutes for it to finally come down to calming. But as you continue practicing that, you develop these fast track pathways. We call that remodeling of the brain, and it allows you to the things that you need for your survival to go rapidly to the areas that you need to direct it to.
That's huge. And a big visualization here is like, think about skiing down a mountain. If you ski down a path the same way over and over, you're reinforcing these pathways. And as you carve deeper and deeper into that mountain, it's easier and easier to keep that track every single time. So that's an easy way to kind of remember that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for going deeper there on various components of boundaries, because as we work to integrate, once we've laid that foundation, I think it's a big piece of staying healthy, right? Not slipping back into, or as much as possible, keeping the practice as healthy as we can. I was going to go in the direction of, these regular activities that are good practices for us to, as we're interacting with others and showing up with love, because we've done this foundational work and we're, got that strong foundation there. What are the things that we're doing as regular practices in our romantic relationships or with people at work that just consistently build that healthy bond?
Yeah, I think that one thing that we failed to understand is that how I perceive someone loving me, my partner may see something differently that makes them feel loved. They have this one quiz that they have. There's several different quizzes, but I like the one that gave you 5 choices. And then you picked it and eventually you scored yourself. So they have it where Do you feel loved if someone gives you a present? Now, if my husband or someone else gave me a present, of course, put no on this one. If they gave me a present, my mind automatically thinks, what are they trying to cover up? What did they do that they're trying to make up for? I mean, that may not be their action. They may be very earnest in giving me a present, but my mind doesn't feel loved that way. I am become suspicious. And so, and you've got a little discovery into my inner parts of my body is I always question people's actions, right? You know, and so for me, I will never feel loved that way. I feel loved if someone helps me. My husband often cleaned the house. Normally, the rule is I'm supposed to keep care of the house. He takes the exterior. I don't like to clean, and yet he cleaned the house for me. You know, so I felt very grateful and thankful and felt loved by that. Where somebody else would not feel that at all, you know, like, hey, you know. So, you know, they kind of look at different things, you know, actions to me always speak louder than words. But, you know, sometimes it's gift things. It's also spending time together. Some people love to be told how much they love you and how wonderful you are. And again, that's my suspicious part of my brain is like, are they trying to manipulate me by these words? You know, and so I don't think I'll ever get into God willing, I won't ever get into a narcissist relationship because I'm not influenced by having someone to tell me how wonderful and perfect and all of these things are. So they draw you in with a hook and then they start tearing you away from people and then they start abusing you. And so, but for some people, that's so desperately wanted and they get so trapped sometimes in a narcissistic relationship and, you know, or a domineering relationship. Some people, they want to be held and cuddled and loved all the time and touched all the time and feel like that's a sign of being loved. And that's fine. And you know, it's just that what is it in you? But that may not be your partner feeling that way. And so sometimes you have to understand how they feel loved. And not just, well, I'm going to do what I would think would be loving. And they might be like me being suspicious, you know, so it's understanding not just yourself, but your partner's needs as well.
That book is called The Five Love Languages, and it's incredible. And the five core components, like there's an assessment like you shared, and it is such a game changer. I mean, David and I, in our relationship, we did this very early on. And I am very much at acts of service at the top, and he is very much a physical touch at the top. And so sometimes I'm trying to figure out how can I help him, and not that he doesn't appreciate it, but really what he needs is just sitting on the couch, like physical touch or spending time, quality time. I think those were his two, and quality time was like my second. And so I think, you know, what you're saying here is so great, that when we really understand not just our needs, but what is the other's needs, and we talk in that love language for them, it's such from an integration, how do we sustain these relationships? It's so powerful. That book is incredible.
Yeah, that's a good one. Now, I think a big thing, like especially in the business place, is listening. Just listen, and listen without an agenda. Don't try to fix problems. See where people are at, the language that people use, the things they talk about, the things that are important to them. These are all cues, and these are all pieces of information that you can kind of tuck away and understand where a person is coming from, the perspective of life that they have, how you're able to help them, make them feel appreciated so they can be more productive, and you can do a lot more together than divided. Now, when it comes to romantic sides of things, I've had my fair share with narcissistic relationships in the past, as my mom can attest to. But ultimately, I think that getting into the romantic side of things, it's a search to find yourself. You want to go look for the person that completes you as a whole, because when you're with someone, you're entangling your energies to become one. So you need to find that person that is you or complements you in the best way possible. Now, for a lot of guys, with the five love languages, physical touch is normally a pretty big one, and quality time normally is too. But the physical touch part is intimate because it's an energy exchange. Even sexual encounters. This is why you have to be so careful about who you're intimate with, because that is an energy exchange. you don't necessarily want to be sharing your energy, especially in that way, with random people that you have no idea what's going on, or could be narcissists and could be trying to manipulate, or who knows what. But you want to find that person that truly compliments you, and normally that is first done through understanding and listening.
Yeah, I see that just a slightly different way, although I think either one of them is probably acceptable. I feel that you have to be whole in yourself. You can't expect somebody else to complete you, right? So it's a matter of sharing similar values and goals and perspectives and desire to be with them. But I don't expect my partner to make me happy. I don't expect my partner to meet my needs. There may be times that I am weak and they're stronger in that. And so I'm very lovingly give them the job of cleaning, where it's not me that likes to do it. So still, if he wasn't there, I still could clean, right? So the problem is when someone puts a burden on the other person, you got to make me happy. You're going to have to tell me how beautiful I am every 5 minutes. Otherwise, I'm just not going to feel complete, or I don't feel worthy. I don't, this over neediness that people have drives you away rather than realize you got to be complete and you need to be joyful. You can't expect somebody else to make you happy because you will never be happy, because you'll always be wanting who's the next person that could make me happy. It has to come from within, the joy.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I was definitely making the assumption that you've already done the inner work first. So it's good to point that out.
And then talk about consistency and just how to advise these relationships. We have a lot of different people in our lives. So, and different people take priority, right? What is the ways that you would advise on being a healthy relationship to the different types and staying consistent or being visible? There's versions of, I'm not holding up my part to be a good friend or be a regular part of my team members' experience. I'm not even doing one-on-ones with them to build the relationship. How do you speak into just how we're showing up, or how often we're showing up to be our best in relationships?
Well, I think in work, as an employer, I think a lot of times people were so busy looking at what other people are not doing or doing and creating in their mind anger, frustration, or envy or jealousy type things. And I know with my kids, they would sit there and say, oh, so-and-so's not doing this or so-and-so's not doing that. And I says, you don't have to pay attention what so-and-so's doing. You just have to pay attention to yourself. And I think, first of all, if you're in a job, you focus on your job. You do the best you can do, right? Some days you're going to be better than other days, right? And don't look at what others are not doing or doing, because that's a judgment. You don't see what they're truly doing, but just because they're sitting there doesn't mean that they're not doing something, right? Sometimes thinking takes more effort than running around, right? So I feel that excellence will always yield the financial incentives that you're acquiring. You don't have to backstab, you don't have to blame, you don't have to complain, you don't have to undermine another worker. You just do your job the best you can. Be grateful for it, be happy about it, and don't let all this emotional garbage keep you limited, because it just is exhausting to deal with this emotional stuff. And when someone does something that does bother you, then you have to sit there and say, why is it? I mean, you don't have to go into a quiet time to do that. You just have to ask yourself, step out of yourself for a moment. Other people get along with them. Why am I struggling? What is it in me that they're triggering? What is in me that I'm seeing in them that's actually in me that maybe needs to be changed, right? And so it's just getting into that constant, that's what I'm saying, I'm always questioning why. And when you always get into that mode of why, you start understanding and you don't get caught into their influence. I used to take a break with the girls and then they'd start to gossip and I would leave. I never told them not to gossip, but I did find over time they stopped when I joined them, they never gossiped. Somehow on their own, they figured it out that I really wasn't interested in it, right? And so we don't have to be, telling them how wrong they are, because that's a judgment, right? It's just that it's not for me, so I leave, right? And that's what you have to do is when you're in a situation that's, sometimes in a job you're meant to move on. And I know that God will provide you to be more and more miserable until finally you decide this isn't for me. And then finally you leave and you find something better. But, sometimes we just keep hanging into something. And you have to know, when am I supposed to hang in, and when am I supposed to, the universe is telling me that it's time for me to go on to something new.
I think a big piece of this too is life is all about the pursuit of Christ consciousness, which is a frequency. Life is all about frequency. And it's actually been scientifically proven that the thoughts that you have up here are a frequency. You have a heart-brain connection, and this is the frequency that you emanate through your biofield. Your biofield can be up to 21 feet in diameter. So that means you're influencing people in that space. So if you think about the thoughts that go through your head throughout the day, are they generally positive or are they generally negative? Are you judging others, as my mom said? Judging is a very low vibrational state. So if you're authentic, regardless of the audience, whether you're alone or any person that's around you, that should remain constant. You shouldn't dictate different behaviors because you're around this person or that person, because that means you're not being authentic to yourself. One of the highest vibrational states that we can be in is being authentic, living through the lens of love and compassion. The more you do that, the more you'll find yourself in flow state, and the more of your dreams and wishes that magically will come through, and the more that you're going to be able to have magical situations like what my mom said, where she just left the room when gossiping happened. Over time, this basically tells them this is not something that she wants to be a part of. So you can do that in a soft manner through just, where do you put your energy and what are you thinking about? And if you're living through the love or compassion lens, you're going to generally find yourself in much better places than if you were always negative or judgmental. So that's a big piece there. And a lot of that is unlocked through meditation. But meditation doesn't have to be sitting like this for 10 or 20 minutes every day. You can meditate throughout the day, just everyday tasks. Just where is your mind going and what are you thinking about? Because thoughts have to happen first before action or behavior can happen. You have to think about doing something before you actually do it. So just always remember that process.
Well, this has been another juicy episode. So much in here, and taking the foundational inner work that we talked about last time that we're touching on a lot in this episode right here, because you never stop, right? It's always the practice, and that's where it all starts, and consistently working on that to love ourselves and accept ourselves and be able to see in that mirror and understand ourselves. And so that inner work never stops. But then when it comes to, the dynamics of others, there are a lot of things we talked about today around the boundaries we have, and then understanding what makes the other person tick, like how they need to be loved or seen or heard, so that we're speaking into what is most important for them. And, living from that true, authentic place to be our best, not just for those other people, but for ourselves. It's so much good. So thank you, Dr. Teddy Saddoris and John Nieters, for another great episode. And we'll see everybody next time on Addicted Betterment with our great content partners for helping us live fully the best in our health, from physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, all the things. So we'll see you guys next time.
So you just listened to this episode. Now, join us in being addicted to betterment. Please subscribe to the show, share with your friends, tag us, and please take a moment, leave a review. Yeah, we do want your stars, but we really want the feedback.